For 160 million years, the Earth had a voice. It was a symphony of roars, bellows, and shrieks, the thunder of titanic footsteps and the beat of leathery wings. It was the sound of the dinosaurs, and it was the sound of life itself. Then, 66 million years ago, a new sound arrived, a deafening, world-shattering scream as a mountain of rock tore through the atmosphere and struck the planet with unimaginable violence. In a single, blinding moment, the symphony of the Cretaceous was replaced by the crescendo of the apocalypse. This was the day the world burned. The initial blast wave and the global firestorm that followed were only the beginning. The true killer was the long, dark silence that came after. Trillions of tons of pulverized rock and silt were hurled into the upper atmosphere, forming a thick, impenetrable shroud around the entire planet. The sun, the source of all life, vanished. For months, perhaps for several years, the world was plunged into a perpetual twilight, a dim, freezing night with no dawn. Acid rain fell from the sky, poisoning the oceans and the land. Photosynthesis ceased, and the great green engine of the planet sputtered to a halt. In this new, cold, and toxic darkness, the second wave of death began, a slow, grinding apocalypse. That starved the survivors of the initial firestorm. The world became a graveyard, and in this global cemetery, a new, strange kingdom began to rise, the kingdom of the fungi, thriving in the endless rot and decay and needing no sunlight to survive. Great carpets of mold and bizarre fungal growth spread across the dead landscape. The fossil record captures this moment as a thin, dark line of fungal spike, a testament to a world briefly ruled by decay. It was a hellish, silent planet, and yet life endured, huddled in burrows deep in the oceans, or simply by sheer dumb luck. Some creatures weathered the storm, and among them, in the deepest, most sheltered corners of this ruined world, were the most unlikely survivors of all, a few scattered, desperate bands of the very titans who were supposed to be gone forever. The day of the asteroid was not the last day of the dinosaurs. It was merely the first day of their long, slow, and agonizing goodbye. Slowly, agonizingly, the long fever broke. After years of darkness, the shroud of dust and soot in the high atmosphere began to thin. The sun, at first a pale, ghostly disk in a gray sky, finally touched the surface of the earth once more. The planet, scarred and sterilized, began to wake from its apocalyptic nightmare. The first life to reclaim the blasted landscape was not the mighty conifer or the flowering plant, but the humble fern. In a phenomenon seen after many mass extinctions, a fern spike occurred as these hardy, opportunistic plants sent the first green shoots through the gray ash, a fuzzy, uniform carpet that was a testament to life's sheer, stubborn refusal to die. But the world that recovered was not the world that had been lost. The rich, complex, and endlessly varied jungles and forests of the Cretaceous were gone forever. In their place, a new and strangely simple kind of forest began to rise. The catastrophe had acted as a great filter, wiping out countless species of trees and plants and leaving only the toughest and most adaptable to inherit the earth. Conifers, with their resilient seeds and hardy nature, were the great winners of this evolutionary lottery. Vast, monotonous forests of a few successful genera, like the pollen-producing asters Classipalus asterisk, now stretched across the continents, from North America to Asia. The landscape was strikingly homogeneous. It was a world rebooted, a planet restored, to a kind of primordial simplicity. As these new forests grew, their most profound feature was not what was there, but what was absent. An explorer, walking through these endless woods, would have been struck by the deep, unnerving, and almost absolute silence. Just a few thousand years before, these same landscapes would have been a symphony of life, a world of roaring tyrannosaurs, bellowing hadrosaurs, and the wing beats of giant pterosaurs. It was a world of constant, thunderous noise. But now, there was nothing. The great voices had been silenced forever. The air, once thick with the sounds of giants, was now still. This was the defining feature of the Danian. It was a quiet kingdom. The only sounds were the whisper of the wind through the conifer needles, the patter of the rain on the ferns, and, if you listened very closely, the faint, almost imperceptible scuttling of the survivors in the undergrowth. The giants were gone, but the world was not empty. In this silent, green kingdom, the meek were preparing to inherit the earth, and among them, clinging to a fragile existence, were the last, tragic remnants of the old world and the humble, fertile beginnings of the new. The quiet kingdom was not entirely empty of its former rulers. For a brief, haunting moment in the Earth's deep history, the ghosts of the Cretaceous still walk the land. Imagine the tiny, shrew-like mammal, one of our own distant ancestors, scurrying through the endless fern prairies of the New World. It is preoccupied with the hunt for insects, but then a shadow falls over it, vast and sudden. A tremor runs through the ground, not from an earthquake, but from a footstep. It looks up to see the colossal, bewildered form of one of the last dinosaurs on Earth. For a long time, paleontologists believed that the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs was absolute and instantaneous. Any fossil found above the thin, gray line of iridium that marks the asteroid's impact was dismissed as a reworked fossil, an old bone washed out of its ancient resting place and reburied in younger rock. But a growing body of evidence suggests that in a few sheltered corners of the globe, some dinosaurs did survive the initial cataclysm. They were what scientists call a dead clade walking, a lineage that has survived a mass extinction event but is now irreversibly doomed, its fate sealed in a world that has fundamentally changed. We can only speculate what their lives were. Like, perhaps a lone hadrosaur, a ghost of the great herds, wandered the homogeneous conifer forests, searching in vain for the diverse flowering plants that once sustained its kind. Its once powerful bellow would now be a lonely, mournful call, echoing through a silent world. Maybe a small pack of dromaeosaurs, the intelligent raptors, found a temporary niche, hunting the tiny mammals that scurried through the undergrowth, their own reign reduced from terrorizing giants to stalking shrew-like creatures in the gloom. These were the last of the titans, clinging to a fragile existence in the twilight of their age. They were relics of a sunnier, richer, and lighter world, cut off from one another. With their food sources gone and their environment altered beyond recognition, they had no future. There were no more great herds, no vast nesting grounds, no evolutionary path forward. One by one, these lonely survivors, the last echoes of a 160 million year dynasty, laid down and died. The last great roar faded into the wind, the last titanic footstep fell silent. With their passing, the age of dinosaurs was truly, finally, over. The throne of the world was now vacant, waiting for a new ruler. With the last of the titans gone, the great silence was now absolute. The 160 million year reign of the non-avian dinosaurs was over. A power vacuum had opened on a planetary scale. The throne of the world left empty. One might assume this was the moment the mammals, our own ancestors, stepped out of the shadows to claim their inheritance. But the dawn of the Age of Mammals would have to wait. The first undisputed rulers of the post-dinosaur world were not the meek newcomers. They were the survivors of the old world, the ancient and resilient lineages of old blood that were perfectly designed to endure an apocalypse. The reptiles, chief among them, were the crocodilians. While the dinosaurs burned and starved, the crocodiles endured. Their cold-blooded metabolism allowed them to go for months without a meal. Their semi-aquatic lifestyle sheltered them from the worst of the fire and fallout. They were masters of survival, and in a world wiped clean of their larger competitors, they thrived. Genera like Borealuscus*, which had once lived in the shadow of giants like Tyrannosaurus rex*, now found themselves at the top of the food chain, growing to lengths of 15 feet. These behemoths became the apex predators of the Danians. Rivers and swamps, the new kings of a shattered world. But when it comes to pure survival, even the crocodiles were outmatched by another reptilian dynasty, the turtles. Turtles are, put simply, nature's ultimate survivalists. Their slow metabolism, adaptable diet, and, of course, their protective shells made them almost perfectly immune to the horrors of the impact winter. While a devastating 93% of mammal species were wiped from the face of the earth, researchers estimate that an astonishing 80% of turtle species sailed through the extinction event, almost unscathed. In the early Danian, the world was teeming with them. They were an armored tide that had flowed through the catastrophe, a quiet, unassuming, and unbreakable foundation for the new ecosystem, and a reliable food source for the new crocodilian. Kings dot, and in the undergrowth of the Quiet Kingdom, a third reptilian power was rising. The extinction event had cleared the stage for the snakes, with their competitors gone. They exploded in diversity. Large constrictors, like boas, became a common and terrifying sight. Some growing over 10 feet long, formidable predators in a world of small prey. The new age had dawned, but it was not the age of mammals. It was the second age of reptiles. But one reptilian group was not content with the waterways and the undergrowth. They were preparing to take the reptilian blueprint. The Danian world was a reptilian empire, and to claim the land itself, kingdom built upon the ashes of the old one. The land, the rivers, and the swamps all belonged to the ancient dynasties of the crocodile, the turtle, and the snake. But in the shadows of this empire, in the leaf litter of the quiet forests, and the safety of nocturnal burrows, a warm-blooded revolution was quietly brewing. Our own distant relatives, the mammals, had survived the apocalypse. For 160 million years, they had lived in the shadow of the dinosaurs, constrained to the size of shrews and badgers. Their evolution suppressed by the titans that ruled the day. They were the meek, the small, and the furtive. But with the titans gone, the ecological chains that had bound them were shattered. The Age of Mammals did not begin with a coronation. It began with a jailbreak. The first inheritors were humble. Creatures like the hypsodontids, generalists that ranged in size from a small rat to a raccoon, scurried through the undergrowth. Despite looking like rodents, they were strangely enough more closely related to modern zebras, a hint at the strange, evolutionary paths that were now open. They, along with the first true marsupials, were the backbone of the new mammalian world. They were adaptable, they were fast-breeding, and they possessed the crucial advantage of being warm-blooded in a world still prone to climatic instability. They were the prey, the bottom of the food chain, but they were the engine of the future. A silent, furry wave of potential spreading across the globe, with the dinosaurs gone. The ecological ceiling that had kept the mammals small for so long was finally gone. For the very first time, they began to grow. Herbivores, once no larger than badgers, now reached the size of sheep. This was a monumental, revolutionary step. But as the prey grew larger, so did the predators, and this is where the mammalian story took a dark and monstrous turn. Nature's first experiment in creating a large, mammalian carnivore was not a sleek and graceful hunter. It was something brutish, powerful, and utterly alien. These were the Mesonychians. Appearing almost immediately after the extinction, the Mesonychians seized the vacant predator niche with shocking speed. Though often reconstructed as wolf-like, they would have resembled no creature alive today. They were uncanny beasts, sporting large heads with powerful jaw muscles, stocky limbs, and a clumsy, bounding gait more like that of a rhino than a lion, which makes sense, as they were ancient relatives of hoofed animals, not modern carnivores. They were a strange, experimental dynasty of killers, and they grew to horrifying sizes. The largest of the Danian Mesonychians was Ancalagon, a creature that reached the size of a modern bear. But it was far scarier than a bear, for a reason that defies logic. Its teeth were blunt. It did not kill with the clean, piercing efficiency of a saber tooth. Instead, it had evolved an immensely powerful bite, a jaw designed to simply crush and pulverize. An Ancalagon would kill its prey through a terrifying application of brute force, biting down with enough power to shatter bone and then simply ripping the meat from its victim. It was a messy, brutal, and horrifying way to die. These were the first mammalian monsters, the brutish, experimental kings of the New Age. But even as they rose to dominance, a new and more refined model of predator was evolving in their shadow. These were the hyenodonts. In the Danian, they were still small, no larger than a medium-sized dog, but they were different. They had sharper, shearing teeth designed for slicing meat, not crushing bone. They had slender bodies and, most importantly, a superior sense of smell, making them expert trackers. They were the heirs apparent, a more sophisticated dynasty of killers biding their time. The mammalian revolution had begun, not as a unified conquest, but as a violent explosion of new forms, with different warm-blooded dynasties already fighting for the throne. But the battle for the future of the planet was not just being fought on land. In the world's other great realm, the oceans, an even older and more terrifying dynasty was rising to claim absolute dominion. Dynasties of reptile and mammal were fighting for the scraps of a broken continent. But the land was only one half of the story. The apocalypse had also reset the balance of power in the planet's other great realms, the skies above and the oceans below. For millions of years, the skies had belonged to the pterosaurs, the great leathery winged rulers of the Mesozoic. But the fire and the darkness had swept them away completely, leaving the air vast, silent, and hauntingly empty. Life, however, was slowly returning. The first to reclaim this empty space were not the birds, but the insects. While they had been devastated, they were quick to recover. And among the most prevalent of these early survivors were a group of unexpected delicacy, the butterflies. In a world of gray ash and monotonous green forests, the sudden, silent flicker of a butterfly's wings would have been a startling splash of color, a fragile and beautiful sign that the world was beginning to heal. And what of the dinosaurs? That remained. The birds, contrary to popular belief, they did not immediately thrive and take over. The asteroid was an avian apocalypse as much as a dinosaurian one. Only a small handful of specialized, ground-dwelling bird lineages managed to survive the years of darkness. In the Danian, they were not yet the rulers of the sky. They were traumatized refugees, slowly and cautiously rebuilding their numbers. Their full recovery still millions of years in the future. For a brief, strange time, the skies of planet Earth belonged to the butterflies, while the air was a realm of quiet, fragile recovery. The oceans were witnessing a far more violent and bloody transfer of power. The seas had lost their own undisputed rulers, the giant marine reptiles like the mosasaurs and plesiosaurs. Their sudden disappearance had left a power vacuum at the absolute peak of the food chain, and an ancient dynasty was perfectly positioned to fill it. The sharks had survived the apocalypse remarkably untouched. Of the 28 families known from the late Cretaceous, 25 swam on into the Danian. They were the ultimate opportunists, and with their great rivals gone, they seized their chance with brutal efficiency. A new king of the ocean was crowned. This was the age of Ototus *, a genus of mackerel shark descended from the hardy Cretaceous survivor Cretalomna *. Ototus * was unleashed. With no giant mosasaurs to keep it in check, it rapidly swelled in size. In less than 1 million years after the extinction, species of Ototus * already matched the size of a large great white, allowing them to hunt almost anything they desired, from the abundant sea turtles to other, smaller sharks. And on the horizon was an even more terrifying omen, Ototus obliquus *, a species that could reach 30 feet in length, a true monster of the deep and the ancestor of the legendary megalodon. For the first time in its long history, a shark was now the single largest predator on planet Earth. The Danian seas were a strange and brutal place. They were teeming with other survivors, like the heavily diversifying eels and the strange, armored, trumpetfish Eocolossus * that appeared near the impact crater. There were still giants, like the bizarre, 11-foot-long Tamarafish Genophodon *, and in the murky depths, the last of the ammonites. A few tragic species that had survived the initial impact clung to a ghost-like existence for a few 100,000 more years before finally vanishing forever. This was the state of the New World, a planet of quiet forests, ruled by reptiles and stocked by monstrous new mammals, under empty skies and above terrifying, shark-filled seas. So this was the world that the asteroid made, a planet reborn through fire and forged in darkness. The land was a quiet kingdom of monotonous forests, a reptilian empire ruled by the ancient dynasties of the crocodile and the turtle, and stalked by new terrestrial horrors like the running land sharks. In the shadows of this cold-blooded kingdom, the first monstrous experiments of our own mammalian lineage were playing out, as the brutish Mesnicians and the more refined Hyenodonts fought for the scraps of a broken world. The skies above were vast and empty, a silent realm of insects and the few traumatized bird lineages that had survived the apocalypse. And the oceans below had become a shark's paradise, a realm of bloody seas where the new apex predator of the planet, the great shark Ototus *, now reigned supreme. This was the Danian. This was the world after the dinosaurs. For over a century, we have referred to the era that followed the dinosaurs as the Age of Mammals. The phrase conjures images of great mammoths, of saber-toothed cats, and of our own ancestors rising to dominate the globe, but this is a profound misunderstanding, a projection of a much later success onto this strange, violent, and transitional first chapter. If you could travel back to this forgotten dawn, you would not find yourself in a mammalian paradise. You would find yourself in a world that still belonged to the old blood. You would be far more terrified of the 15-foot crocodiles in the rivers and the giant boas in the undergrowth than you would of the sheep-sized herbivores or the clumsy, dog-sized mammalian carnivores. The Danian was not the age of mammals. It was the reptile's resurgence. It was the shark's succession. This brutal and chaotic period was not a simple placeholder in Earth's history, a quiet interlude between the great dynasties. It was a crucible. The apocalyptic conditions of the impact winter acted as the most extreme evolutionary filter imaginable, selecting only for the toughest, the most adaptable, and sometimes the luckiest. The power vacuums that appeared on land and in the sea were an invitation for frantic, evolutionary experimentation. This was nature's chance to throw everything at the wall and see what stuck. It produced wonders, like the delicate beauty of the first butterflies in a ruined world, and it produced nightmares, like the uncanny, bone-crushing Mesnikians. This forgotten dawn was a necessary age of monsters, a violent and chaotic laboratory where the blueprints for the next 66 million years of life were being drafted, and in this crucible, the seeds of our modern world were quietly being sown. The small, adaptable mammals, though not yet dominant, were surviving. In the shadows of the reptilian empire, they were diversifying, experimenting with new diets and new ways of life. The very competition between the first mammalian predators, the Mesnikians and the hyenodonts, was a trial by fire that would forge the efficient, intelligent carnivores that would one day rule the land. The few bird species that survived were slowly, painstakingly, rebuilding the foundations of what would become their modern, global dynasty. The Danian was the brutal, bloody, and bizarre first chapter of the Cenozoic, our own era. It was a world that had to be endured before the world we know could be built. The planet had been reset, and the rules of life were being rewritten in a chaotic frenzy of survival and succession. All the great figures of the later Age of Mammals, the giant rhinos, the saber-toothed cats, the whales, and eventually the apes that would become us, owed their existence to the humble, furtive survivors of this forgotten dawn. The stage was now set. The reptilian kings would have their brief, glorious reign, but the warm-blooded revolution had begun. The great explosion of mammalian life, which would one day conquer every corner of the planet, was about to begin.